Good.
Yeah.
And we're live.
Woohoo!
Hello, everyone. Good evening, welcome, or good afternoon, whatever time zone you're in right now. I am your host, Dr. Jess. Welcome. If it's your first time, welcome back. If you're joining us again, I am Dr. Jess, your creative academic, and today we are talking all things Stress Awareness Month and state test. Oh, I'm sorry, state testing season. Try to say that a couple of times. I've said that so many times, I can't say it in a row. Anyways, you're probably tuning in because you want to hear about stress. And we have our stress management specialist today joining us. Jyothi, it's so good to see you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I can say with complete sincerity that I've been looking forward to this all day. So it's been a bright spot on my calendar for the whole week.
Now, it is honestly no coincidence that we have state testing season coming along with Stress Awareness Month because testing is extremely stressful. So, if you're
Mhm.
watching this and you struggle with test anxiety, we want you to know that you are so much more than your score. There's so many things that make you who you are. And in this season, there are healthy ways to study and to do the best in your tests, but also to just dive deeper into the things that you enjoy and things that make you show up as your best self. And that's what we're here to help you do today. So, of course, I can't do that alone. As usual, we have a fantastic guest. We are very attentive to our selection of guests. So, I kid you not when I tell you we pick the best of the best. And I'm joined by Jyothi. Now, Jyothi, I'm going to give you your flowers. Okay. So, Jyothi is a full-time yoga and meditation teacher who continues to connect head and heart in all of her professional and personal work. Now, as a mom, a professional, a one-time education policy analyst, which I need to ask you about that, but also a Navy wife. She is no stranger to stress, right? She's constantly had to live in different places and navigate stressful situationships, both professionally and with her family. So this is someone that knows what she's talking about. And Jyothi, I'm so excited to get to do this little activity with you. So actually, I'm going to hand over to you. Before
Mhm.
we dive into the rest of our time today, Jyothi is going to take us through some breath work.
Yeah. So whenever I am moving into a new kind of context, I love to start with just 3 deep breaths.
Okay.
It's super simple. Anybody can do it from wherever you are.
Okay.
So everybody that's in this room, virtually and literally, let's just feel your feet on the floor
Okay.
and just kind of feel your sitting bones and just feel a sense of attention coming into the spine. And then either find something in your surroundings that you just enjoy looking at, or you can close your eyes if that feels better to you. And then just the next time that you feel yourself breathing in, just acknowledge that that is your in breath. And then as you breathe out, acknowledging that that is your out breath. And as you breathe in, you give the breath permission to take its time. And as you breathe out, you release any sense of urgency or rushing. So you breathe in, permission to take your own time. And you breathe out and release any sense of urgency or rush. And then we start to come out of that super brief practice. You can just let your awareness come back to your surroundings. Maybe you wiggle your little toes or your fingers. If the eyes were closed, maybe you blink a few times, just kind of letting the light slowly filter back in. And then we're ready to reestablish connection on the screen. So it's like a little magic reset button that you
Yeah.
can take.
Oh my gosh, am I
Yeah.
about to have all of us, all our guests doing 3 breaths before every interview?
Yeah.
That was so good. Wait,
Yeah.
so you had me think about my spine as I was
Mhm.
sitting. Why the spine? I mean,
So I think of like the breath, the spine is kind of like the corridor for the breath.
okay,
And a lot of us, particularly if we're seated, whether we're in cars or we're at desks, like we tend to slouch, which
absolutely.
automatically kind of like collapses like the lungs and all the parts of the body that inhibit you from taking a full breath. So literally just sitting upright, it's like changes your ability to take a deep breath.
Oh,
Yeah.
that absolutely makes sense. But thank you for that.
Yeah.
If you were watching and you had a chance to do that, I hope that you received it the way I did, because now I'm
Mm,
very aware of my spine. I want to sit
yeah.
erect, and I know that you can see me.
Yeah.
I don't
It's
wanna-
so it's so nice too, because if you think of it, whether you're, a student, a professional, it doesn't matter your age, your context, you're
Mhm.
constantly kind of changing situations, whether it's from one class to another, or one meeting to another, or one email to another. And we very rarely take a moment for that pause to
Yeah.
just let things transition. And it
Mhm.
takes all of like 15 seconds.
Oh, that's brilliant. Okay, I already have like three questions running through my head. Before we go in that direction, we do want to go back to, or to go to
Hmm.
our poll. So every week we have a poll question that goes out, where we're trying to get a feel for where our users are at. And so this week, the question was
Hmm.
about stress. So how do you feel about your upcoming tests? Right? We had 17% saying they feel okay, just need to study. 19% said I'm a little nervous, but it's manageable. 39%, which is typically where I would be in my Saluna years. Um,
Hmm.
stressed and not excited.
Hmm.
14% said I don't really care, to be honest, and 11% said it feels like the world is on fire. That last one actually makes me think of the meme with the dog sitting in a room and everything is on fire.
Everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So do these numbers surprise you at all?
No.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
they really don't. If anything, I'm maybe mildly surprised that the 39 is not a little bit higher, but
Hmm.
then looking at the 19 and 14 on either side, I think it really makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I wonder what the 17% with the okay, but I just need to study. Like, I wonder what else is going on there. Like, are
Mhm,
people are actively, like, practicing mindfulness, or
mhm,
they're just like generally good planners, and they've been planning for this whole time and have managed the emotions around it.
mhm.
Yeah, I wonder what's.
Or yeah, it's interesting too because it could absolutely be that. You may be hitting the nail on the head. There also may be a percentage of that 17 percentage group that is wanting to be okay, but is maybe procrastinating a little bit and
Ooh,
is just pushing it off, is not
mhm.
actually maybe facing it. So
Yeah,
they're wanting to feel okay, but
yeah,
maybe they just keep pushing it off.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, procrastination is like such a coping mechanism for me. Like, I find myself
Uh-huh.
realizing, you know what? I'm gonna be okay because I've pushed this away from my mind right
Mhm.
now. And like,
Mhm.
it's typically vilified. Like, it's looked at like this
Mhm.
bad thing. But if I know I'm gonna get to it, I will be okay. But in this moment, I don't have the capacity to think through it.
Mhm.
I'm just going to have to procrastinate. It is what it is. Best
Well, and
best
I
managed.
I don't I don't wanna, like, hijack any questions the way that we're going, but it's funny because I have a kiddo who's neurodivergent, and he tends to procrastinate because it eliminates some of the anxiety.
Yes.
And then in order to get his brain to really kick into gear and really focus, he actually immediately jumps to that final percentage of the world is on fire, because when the world is on fire, it's like he can focus and get stuff done. And
Uh-huh.
so we just skip through all of the stages in between and we go from put it off, put it off, put it off to like, ooh, it has to happen now. But then that actually for his system is what stimulates the focus and the concentration.
Yes. I found something
So
I have in common with your chat.
yes, yes, yeah.
Well,
And so I think what I'm pointing out here is when we talk about stress, there's
yes,
not one way to deal. There's not a right way to deal with
yes,
stress. We
yes,
all are different. All of our brains are different. The way that we need to respond to it is different. And we actually, I think that spaciousness around what works for us is really important because it's great to share best practices and to know what your best friend does. That
mhm,
may or may not be the solution for you. So
mhm,
some people may actually enjoy and thrive on a little bit of that world is on fire energy because
mhm,
that's just the way their brain is kind of wired. And
yes,
so I think it's really important not to paint that as a negative statistic. For
yeah,
some people, that's actually how things work.
yes. Oh, that's so well said. Okay, so Jyoti, clearly you have done so much work personally and professionally to get to this point of just being able to guide people so beautifully. And I do want to explore that in a little bit, but I want to just lock in on you, if that's okay. I want
Hmm.
to hear about your background. So how did you go from an education analyst to which I'm pretty sure is a very stressful environment,
Yeah.
to being a stress management specialist and yoga instructor. What was
Yeah.
that for me?
So I think it was a byproduct of kind of like personal necessity and what really aligned with my skill set,
Okay.
and also necessity for being an active duty military spouse. So, working in politics, it's all about who you know, connections, networking. And I had a lot of connections and networking in the state that I worked in. And moving anywhere from every 6 months to every 3 years with the military, it was going to be really hard to have any stability in that
Mm,
career once I was married. Um, I'll back up a tiny bit and say that I live a life of active recovery from eating disorders and self harm. So I've been in recovery communities since I was about age 13.
mm,
Um, and part of my recovery when I was in my early 20s became meditation, yoga, and mindfulness practices. Those were not exclusively the tools that I used, but they became very foundational tools that I relied on.
mhm.
And I was more and more interested in diving deeper. I've always loved being a student. I've loved learning. And so there was this kind of opening, like it was my life was already changing. I was moving into this whole new phase. And it was like, well, why not use this as an opportunity to go and explore something different, kind of an act two sort of a thing.
Yeah.
So I did the really wild thing where I moved to an ashram for 5 months before I got married and lived there. It was actually great. It was like really recentering. And I lived in an ashram for 5 months and got a lot of my training and kind of foundational stuff done. And then got married. And I have been able to teach and find access to either teaching yoga or meditation or mindfulness or all three,
Mhm.
all of the 8 places that we've been stationed over the last 14 years.
That's beautiful. So educate me. I'm not familiar with an ashram. What is that? So it sounds
Yeah.
like a school, right? A place for like learning
Yeah.
mindfulness for yourself and being trained to train others. But you were there for 5 months. So what was
Yeah.
that
So
experience?
an ashram, you can also, monasteries are similar, but sometimes they come from different traditions. It's essentially like a spiritual community.
Okay.
So typically, people that live there are monks and permanent. Sometimes there's lay people that live there, but monks typically also live there. They're the one I went to was ecumenical, so it wasn't attached to any particular belief system.
Mhm.
So it didn't matter what lineage you came from or what background you came from. Everyone was welcome there. But
Right.
we got to study yoga and meditation and mindfulness on a daily basis there, and you're really saturated in
Yeah.
that community.
I've
Yeah.
actually seen quite a bit of the work from that spill into your practice
Ah,
on social media, which is so cool. So I got to scroll through, especially your Instagram, uh,
mhm.
and I'm like, oh, she's a teacher. I see it in this. Beautiful. But one of the things that jumped at me was your intentionality with it. So there were a lot of colors and
Mm.
your use of terminology and all that. And I was like, there's some kind of art going on here. Like she probably just clearly enjoys the use of colors, but there has to be something behind how intentional this is. Am I reading that correctly, or is that me just being fascinated by everything you're doing?
Yeah. So I've never been one for New Year's resolutions. That's never really worked for me. But I have done for a number of years. I did like a word of the year kind of a thing. I think a number of people do this. This is not a new concept, but it's
Mhm,
like you take a word and that's kind of what you study or kind of deep dive in for a whole year.
mhm,
And I haven't done one for a couple of years, and it's specifically because 2 years ago I did a year-long study on delight. And I read like half a dozen different books that were all focused on delight. And that kind of spilled over into learning more about fun and play and joy. And that was also really aligned with me trying to be a more engaged human overall, both in my family and in the world. And this recognition that like the delight and the joy were absolutely these like parallel necessities running alongside my capacity to show up for the hard things, whether they were within the four walls of my family or in my community or in my world. And I spent a whole year looking for delight. And color became one of the simplest foundations of that. Because every day when I wake up, no matter
mhm.
what my mindset is, no matter what my energy is, whatever I'm put on, it's like this automatic, like, delight filter that I just kind of cover myself in. And then it became like this game of like looking for delight everywhere I went, like hide and seek almost, like, oh, that flower's blooming today. It wasn't blooming on my walk with my dog yesterday. How amazing. Or that moment that like you see somebody that's like a total stranger and you just like think they are wearing the coolest shoes and you're like, your shoes are awesome.
Yeah.
And like taking those moments to like drop in with a little bit more attention and like notice the delight, point it out to other people if you're
Yeah.
seeing it. Like it changed my whole outlook on everything.
Oh, that's beautiful. So essentially color or like attentiveness to colors were your channel to just like
Yeah,
noticing other things, like noticing beauty in many
completely.
areas.
And it's also, I am a person that lives with anxiety and has dealt with depressive tendencies, and color became one of the most accessible tools
Yeah.
for kind of like shifting my energy, shifting my mood,
Hmm.
in really, really simple ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I literally, I'm not exaggerating. If you lived nearby, I'd have you swing by and confirm it. I do not own a single piece of black in my wardrobe,
Really?
not
Oh,
even my workout
you would
clothing.
hate my closet. Oh my gosh, you would
Yeah.
hate the closet. I have so much
And if you walk around my home, like all of our furniture is from like thrift stores and
fun.
things, but art is everywhere. And it's the
Yeah,
one thing that I like invest in and carry
yeah,
around everywhere. Mhm.
yeah. Oh, okay. Real quick anecdote. This is why my mom would love you. This is why. So for the longest, so I love to pair like with my furniture, my decoration, whatever. I like to mix up, neutral colors and all of that. For the longest time, I had a lot of black and gray and some white. And when I was moving into an apartment, this is several years ago, my mom was like, I'm going to come visit. I want to help you buy some stuff. I'm like, okay, sure. And so she buys me this bright green pot set, this pink and white shower curtain, and like just very key things in my home that she knew
Yeah,
I have to match other things too.
too.
Like, are you kidding me? I'm like stressed out. But when I actually sat with the colors and started to let myself decorate with the
Mhm,
colors that she provided for me, they were actually precious. And I loved sitting at home. And there was something
mhm,
about just opening the windows or the blinds and having natural light come in and like hit those colors. I was like, oh, okay,
mhm,
Mom, you were right.
mhm. Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
she would absolutely adore you in your closet.
Mhm.
Be like, you should probably like let her help you. So, um,
Totally.
while we are talking about stress, one of the things I realized is I don't think I've actually seen people define stress. Like over time, it's just something
Mhm,
that we've learned to identify, right? And
mhm.
we were journeying through identifying stress in ourselves, like seeing stress in others. But if we were to actually put words to it, how would you define it? And if there are types, what would those types be?
Yeah. So I think there's a few really important distinctions to make here.
Mhm.
So the baseline definition is really that just stress is when there is pressure or tension that's exerted on an object.
Right,
Gravity is stress. Like
right.
every single one of us is under stress all the
We're
time.
all experiencing stress. Got it.
Yeah. So I think there's two different distinctions that I want to make. The first is the difference between a stressor, which is the word stress with OR at the end, a stressor
Mhm.
versus stress.
Mhm.
So the stressor is an external thing or event or person that imposes the stress.
Mhm.
And that's important because sometimes we don't make that distinction that the stressor is outside of us, it's externalized.
Mhm.
The stress is how we interpret or respond to the stressor. So it's the internal piece of the external thing.
Mhm.
So that distinction is really important because a lot of times they just get muddied together as one thing, and they're really not. Because just like we took the 3 breaths at the beginning of this session, which was really a pause practice,
Mhm.
identifying the separation between the stressor and the stress is giving you that capacity to notice the pause, to notice what is the stressor.
Mhm.
And then from that, what I would say as well is it allows you to identify, I often call it the sphere of control, which
Okay.
is what is inside of your sphere of control? What do you have any capacity to change or alter or influence?
Mhm.
That's all you need. That's all you can focus on.
Yeah.
Anything that's outside of that sphere of control, like you don't control it. You
Mm.
just don't by definition. So if the stressor lies out here, then the only thing you control is the way you're responding to it internally.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband says something which I love so much. He says, "What a great opportunity to underreact,"
Ooh,
which I love
I
because a
like
lot
that.
of times we see everything as an opportunity to overreact.
Yep.
And he's like, "Wow, what a great opportunity to underreact."
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, if you notice, hey, this is not in my sphere of control, there's actually nothing I can do here, man, think of all the things you would not be carrying, the burdens you would not be loading up on if you were able to make that distinction.
Oh, that's good. My
Yeah,
opinion of that is that's not my business, and I just
yeah,
leave it.
mhm,
But the opportunity to underreact is like the opposite of dramatic, and I love
yeah, yeah.
that.
The other thing that I would point out that I think is really important, and this kind of brings in to the conversation the idea of chronic stress.
Mhm.
And I'm actually going to use like the physical body as an example, and from my lens as a yoga teacher. So, like we talk about when we're doing yoga poses, every single yoga pose, or if you're somebody that goes to the gym or you run or whatever, you are intentionally putting your body under some amount of stress. And that's actually really good for your muscles, your bones, your nervous system, all the things. A little bit of stress is great. It actually builds anti fragility, resilience, all those things that we want more of. However, if you can envision, like you've probably seen it on Instagram or in a yoga magazine or something, like the back bending pose, where someone, or you've seen a gymnast do that back bending
Mhm.
pose.
Yep.
A healthy back bending pose almost looks like a beautiful rainbow in the sky. It's this beautiful arc where there's this equal distribution of that curvature. And in the physical body, that would be in the vertebra of the spine.
Mhm.
Where we get into problems is where there's some sort of acute stress on one particular area of that arc,
Mhm.
or you hold it for an inordinate amount of time,
Mhm.
which is too much of a weight on things. What I'm describing here is acute stress and chronic stress. So there may be an acute stress moment that's really intense. That's also where trauma can happen, that can cause very real harm.
Hmm.
And that's not to be negated. There's also chronic stress, which is where it is compounding like a snowball over time. And
Mhm.
it's the system is not meant to sustain that level of chronic stress. And
Mhm.
that becomes really problematic. And we know that's problematic physically, mentally, emotionally. The whole human system can
Mhm.
get really overloaded. So I
Mhm.
do think it's important to label not all stress is equal.
Right.
That acute and the chronic is really important to understand.
That's really good. So I like that image of the art. I don't think mine looks like a perfect rainbow when I do it. I don't think so. But so
Which, and I'm sorry to step on your voice, but I think this is actually an opportunity. That's why, like in a yoga practice, we're like, oh, maybe you need some blocks. Maybe you need a bolster.
Mhm.
Maybe you need a blanket. We
Mhm.
call it scaffolding. But how many times in our life do we be like, ooh, this might be an opportunity for me to ask for some help?
Mhm. Oh,
And what
that's
does that help look like?
yeah.
Yeah.
So with identifying like where the stress is in your body during that arc, do you have to be kind of an instructor to be able to identify where that is, or can you just pick up yoga, try the arch, and then realize, oh, I might be carrying stress, or yeah, how can a person that's new to yoga find where that stress is?
Mhm. So I will say, please, nobody go lay on your floor and try to press into a back bend right
I'm
now unless you have some
2 seconds away.
experience. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. But I do think you're bringing up something really important, Jess, which is we all need people that are mirrors in our lives that
Mhm.
hold up and reflect things for us.
Mhm.
It's really important.
Mhm.
And I'm a huge fan of the and we have incredible capacity for our own internal wisdom
Mhm.
to tap in and know where stress is,
Mhm.
literally in the body, but
Mhm.
also know when there's a situation that, like, this is not right for me. It
Mm.
may be okay for my neighbor, but it's not for me. And I trust my intuition to know that this is not the right situation for me or pose for me or X, Y, or Z, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So I think it's both. You need those trusted advisors in your life that have gained access to your vulnerability, your authenticity, your truth. And I was very intentional in saying that, like, that's not everybody. Those are people that have earned the right to that authenticity and vulnerability and truth. And you also need to know that you are inherently so wise. You know yourself. There's a quote by Lao Tzu that says, in the center of your being, you know who you are and you know what you need.
That's good.
And I do think, particularly as students, a lot of us are really, really good students, which means that we're very good at listening to an external teacher and adapting to what they want to see from us, to meeting their expectations for us. And we forget that we actually have this whole well of like wisdom and inner teaching that it doesn't have to always play the trump card, but we also don't want to lose access to it either.
Right. That's good. So in your practice, I'm sure you come across a lot of people that fall into the Gen Z age range who actually happen to be a big part of our audience. And so I'm just wondering, when we talk about stressors, what do you think, what have you seen in your practice as some typical stressors for Gen Zs? And that's apart from the test taking, because, we're very much in that season right now.
Some of the language that I used when we were doing the 3 breaths in the beginning, I talked about giving the breath permission to take its time coming in, and then noticing or experimenting with like releasing urgency, releasing rush. And I think that looks like a lot of things. I think we are a very fast moving society. I'm not saying anything we don't know. When we stop, sometimes there's this internal inertia. It's like when you stop a car really quickly, and there can be this kind of like whole internal like whoop, like when you stop and take 3 breaths, that you feel how the body, like the mind and the heart maybe still going 90 miles a minute, even though you're trying to slow down and breathe. I would couple that with the fact that, and I struggle with this as well, but I really see it. I have 3 younger brothers that are in their late teens and early 20s. So we're like 12 years apart, like, so big age gap. And there's this incredible pressure to always be taking in more, whether that is social media, whether that is news, which often comes from this desire to be engaged, to like understand the world, to be proactive. If you're in school, always to learn more, to like enroll for the next class, it's like, but it's like you're just doing this all the time. You're just like having to gorge on information. And we're not designed to like process that much that quickly. And so I think one of the biggest obstacles, and this is going to sound like a really silly, I think, because who knows if people read this, in Winnie the Pooh, which was written by A.A. Milne, which I completely believe was written for adults, not for children. The word that he capitalizes throughout the entire book is the word nothing. The letter N and the word nothing is capitalized throughout the whole book. And I am convinced it's because A.A. Milne knew that it is absolutely critical for our humanity every single day to do nothing on purpose.
Yeah. So I wish I could just reach into my closet right now and show you my favorite sweatshirt that's just Winnie the Pooh, just kind of peeking there, because it just speaks to me on so many levels. While you were speaking, I was realizing, man, this is really something that we don't outgrow, because I've always struggled with that, like letting myself rest, giving myself permission to rest without the guilt of like other people are doing stuff. I need to be doing stuff too. I've had opportunities in my life to actually pause and rest. Literally a couple of days ago, I was telling someone, man, I should have taken advantage of that. And they asked me like, well, if that happened again, would you do anything differently? And I couldn't honestly say yes. I'm still not in the habit, and I'm not young. I am not Italian. I'm not a young person, or like all relative, but I'm in my 30s and I still have not practiced that. So that's really something that we don't grow, and like learning to do nothing sounds like it needs to be a practice, right?
It's exactly it. And we're so skillful, and we are very intentionally taught how to be productive, how to make lists, how to use time management, all that stuff. I'm not negating any of those things. They're important, but there's this whole column of other things that's also important. Rest is resistance. I radically believe in, and doing nothing falls in that category. And we can't show up for this other column of things that we keep being taught how to do if we don't also develop this practice and skillfulness around resting and doing nothing.
Yeah. So if we're kind of creating a list of things for stress management, we definitely want to put rest at the top. But do you find yourself tailoring stress management to different clients, or do you think we're at a point
Mhm.
in our understanding where like most techniques would work for pretty much anyone?
So I love this question so much, and I'm going to use an example that brings in one of my children.
Okay.
So my oldest child is almost 10. I've mentioned he's neurodivergent and he's very sensory seeking. And he told me this was like a week ago. It was the end of the week. He'd had a really intense week. Ironically, he's in stakes testing in third grade for these 2 weeks.
Mhm.
And he was like, "Mommy, I need to go and like do my calm down activity." And I joked because I like went upstairs and he has a strobe light in our playroom, like in the dark. He's on his hoverboard and he's got headphones on and he has this DJ kit and he's like on his hoverboard doing a DJ kit with the strobe light. That's his calm down activity
That's amazing.
because for him, sensory stimulation is actually calming to his nervous system. That's
Mhm.
exactly what he needs. And his internal intuition knew that that's what he needed in order to reset. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sensory averse. And I'm down there snuggled in with my blanket with my Labrador next to me, reading my book in total silence with a little lamp. And that's me down regulating and calming. And they're both equally valid as like stress management practices.
Mhm.
So I use that to say that I don't really think they're universal. I think breath is the universal mindfulness stress management tool, but
Mhm.
there are a multitude of ways to use the breath that access both the nervous system picking up, which is more your sympathetic nervous system, or down regulating, which is more your parasympathetic nervous system. So the mechanism may be like the breath, but the
Mhm.
way you apply it, I think, is really personal.
Yeah. Well, I love that example with just very different experiences of like regulating yourself for you and
Hmm.
your son, like your offspring. You're supposed to have very, similar DNA.
Hmm.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
assuming I think you mentioned he's
yeah,
your
he
boy.
is. Yeah, he is my biological
You have
son.
very
Yeah.
different experiences. Do you find that helping him manage his stress is a little more complicated because you are his mom?
Mm, I don't think so.
Okay.
No. I'm really really a fan. Again, I go back to the language that I used that I will echo here,
Mhm.
that the people that have really earned a right to seeing your vulnerability and your authenticity,
Mhm.
and both of my children and my spouse are in that tribe of individuals.
Mhm.
And I'm really transparent and honest with them. We do a lot of what we call like naming practice in our family, where it's like, hey, like I'm just letting you know I'm feeling really overstimulated today. We also use the imagery, you may or may not have heard a bit of like the window of tolerance, which
Mhm.
is basically like um, 60-second tutorial. If you imagine a window, when you're inside of your window of tolerance, it's like where you're really grounded, capacitated. You can access your emotions, your rationality, your body. Everything feels like stable and good.
Mhm.
When you're above your window of tolerance, that's when you're like hyperactivity. That tends to be where like anxiety, anger, frustration, reactivity live.
Mhm.
And so you need certain things that kind of get you back down into the window. When you're underneath your window of tolerance, that's where lethargy, apathy, depression, shutdown. So
Mhm.
it's like fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, or above, freeze is down below. And so we use that imagery of the window. And my window's really narrowed today. So I'm just letting you know I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. I may get pushed above or below. That's imagery that both my 7 and my 10-year-old understand
That's great.
and is really relatable. But it kind of like we're constantly temperature taking in our family. Where are we today? What's going on? What's here? And to me, what that does is it opens this doorway to like compassion, to like
Mhm.
listening, being like, oh, mommy's going through some stuff. It's like she's having a day. And then like they're not as hard on me. They kind of get it. And vice versa. Like that's a totally bi directional relationship in our
Yeah.
household.
Yes, and seeing that the adult is giving themselves permission to experience their emotions and need time away, like gives them permission. Like I grew
Yes.
up not really feeling like I had permission to feel because you usually had to cater to the adults, you know,
Mhm.
feelings and situations, but I love that there is this, this space for respecting
Yeah.
each other's time and capacity. You also mentioned the words vulnerability and authenticity, and I love that so much because I'm not exaggerating. I think of those two words almost every time I think about my students who are all Gen Z. They're kind of on the older end because they're in college, but I find that there is so much vulnerability in the best way, and authenticity, and a desire to go beyond, or to kind of understand the root of their stress, right?
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of as we're thinking about that with authenticity and looking for the issue behind the stress, or like the root stressor, how do you guide your clients to getting to that root? Is it like multiple sessions? Do you feel like you're able to get there just through basic conversations? What is that process?
Yeah. I think that some people come in and they're really ready and eager to
Mhm.
get to that kind of root cause. And so their capacity to do so is a little bit more accelerated. Typically, when I'm working with somebody, I'm trying to get them to a place of curiosity. Curiosity is a superpower. If you can get somebody to a place where they're curious about why they're responding a certain way or why they're feeling a certain way, then all of a sudden everything's open. There's so much potential in a space of curiosity.
Mhm.
When if I'm talking to somebody and I'm asking certain questions that are really like pulse taking conversations, I'm just seeing what's in the room, how somebody's feeling on that given day. If I'm hearing a lot of like inner critic kind of voice, if I'm hearing a lot of judgment, a lot of kind of polarizing things, putting things in categories,
Mhm.
I try to start to dial us closer and closer towards curiosity. Creativity is another one, because when you're in a state of creativity, which also links up with a lot of the research done on fun and play, then that inner critic can't really talk. And you literally can't be actively critical of yourself and also be having fun and creating something. So if you can start to dial up on creativity and
Yeah.
curiosity,
Yeah.
that's where the good stuff lives, because then you can do the hard work. You can start to dig deep, but without shutting down, without some of those protective mechanisms, which by the way are really like, they're evolutionary. We need them. They kept us alive, but not all of them are really serving us anymore.
Mhm.
So the longer we can stay curious about them and figure out why do I respond this way every time that this comes up, that's where the potential really lives. So I'm constantly just trying to get people to move towards
Mhm.
curiosity, towards creativity. Yeah.
Oh, that's precious. I love that. So I'm going to draw attention a little bit to a question we have in the chat. So this is a stressed
Mm.
out dinosaur who's asking a very real question right now. Besides deep breathing, Jyothi, is there something I can do before a test?
Shake. I would
Ooh,
say shake.
okay. Like
So
just
so yeah, it can look like that, or it can look like a full body, like stand up and shake. If you have ever, and they have film of this, when like a deer has been almost hit by a car or they've been tapped a little bit, they'll run into the woods. They'll run just far enough that they're like no longer in immediate danger. And then they stand there and their whole body goes, and
oh,
then they move on. And so it is literally because we share a lot of DNA with our animal counterparts
mhm.
that resets their nervous system. So if you're feeling really anxious, really bottled up, particularly we also tend to feel stress in our digestive system. So don't drink coffee on the morning of a test. Sorry, get a decaf. But
Good one. Yeah.
turn on your favorite song, like, and shake,
Mhm.
and do it like in a closet where nobody's looking. There's, your inner critic can't be there, and just shake. Yeah,
Mhm. Oh, that's
yeah,
so good. It also just hit me. This is our human tendency to kind of stay on the negative and luck in there. The saying "a deer in headlights" really could be longer. Like a
hmm,
deer in headlights, but it once it's away, it shakes it off. Quite literally.
absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
good. I
And
like
then
that.
if you don't have capacity to move your whole body, then use your mouth. So doing things like things like that
Mhm.
get that same kind of vibrational tendency, which echoes up into the brain. is also has very similar effects. So blowing raspberries, if you've ever seen babies do it, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So
Humming is another one. Yeah.
these are really good. Okay, well, I can't be writing these things down. I need to focus on you, but I'm gonna come back and play this again because these are really
Yeah.
good for that. Stressed out dinosaur, I hope you're gonna get to practice. So shake, right? Blow raspberries, don't drink coffee before the test. All right. If you have any more questions, keep dropping them in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them. So Jyothi, in your opinion, what are some common misconceptions about stress management?
Well, number one, I think, and we kind of touched on this, but I'm going to reiterate it. Stress is neither literally nor figuratively a four-letter word. So it's not a negative. In fact, it is an inescapable part of the human contract. If you're a human, you're going to experience it. So it's not a bad thing. Okay. So you can just change that relationship in your head. It's all about another thing my therapist often says when we're in a difficult situation is what a great opportunity to use your tools. So you can think of what are my tools? This is a great opportunity for me to use them. And then, yeah, remind me of the question because I was just thinking about the toolbox.
Of course. You should be thinking about the toolbox anytime you get a chance. Common misconceptions about stress management.
Yeah, I think the other one is that like it's silly and not for me. And I'll use the example of visualization as a really powerful stress management practice, like visualizing acing the test or visualizing it. I used to work in nursing homes with patients that were dealing like post major health issues and we're trying to regain some of their physical mobility. And visualization was one of the primary tools that we use. And I have young people that come to me all the time and be like, well, I don't really like visualization. It seems really kind of woo and also silly and like doesn't work. Yeah. And my question that I always ask people is, do you worry? Do you ever worry? Worry is visualization. It's just visualizing. It's the negative power of visualization. So if you worry, you are already like a master at visualization. You're just not using it for your good. You're like using it for negative. So like, don't tell me you're not good at it. You're already good at it. You just got to flip the script.
Well, that's so good. I mean, apparently I practice visualization every day.
Yeah, most of us do. Most of us do.
Wow, that's so good. So you do carry a pretty wide range of people through techniques. Do you come across people who are just skeptic about it, or like yoga is just too a little out there for them? How do you address skepticism when you know like what stress management practices or techniques can do for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, like the proof is often in the practice. It's like go back to the beginning of this recording and do the 3 breaths again, and you're going to feel that it works. And I will say language is important because there are a lot of stories that have been hooked onto some of these words like yoga, words like mindfulness, and they've not always been used accurately. They've not always been used with any contribution to historical context or referencing the cultures that they came from. And they've also sometimes been used to do certain harm. I know, like, for instance, well-being is something right now that's being integrated into a lot of workplaces, but it's being used to really talk about like diet culture in workplaces, which is far less than helpful. So I am really careful about, and a lot of times I don't even use words like yoga or mindfulness or meditation. Like throw them out the window. If they don't serve you, fine. Let's just sit here and feel our feet on the ground and just notice that we're breathing in and notice that we're breathing out. That's just us being humans with bodies that are breathing. And we're just noticing it. And so I think part of it is if the language doesn't work for you, that's okay. Like take all of that out, strip it down to like its absolute essence. And it really works. It speaks for itself a lot of the time.
That's really good. So at the top of our time together, you mentioned chronic stress and acute stress. I imagine that when it comes to chronic stress, you're kind of approaching burnout at this point, right? What would you say to our listener who is like, you know what, I am at the point of burnout. I don't feel motivated to do anything. So these techniques of even getting up to do something, it feels like a lot. Being asked to even do something right now feels like a lot. What would you say to them?
Um, I would say that this is a symbol of me having children, but I think it's actually more of a symbol that I just love books, particular children's literature. And one of my favorite is The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. And it's really a collection of illustrations. I highly recommend everybody look into it. And there's an illustration of the boy, the fox, and the mole, and the horse. And the boy says, "What is the bravest thing you've ever said?" And the horse said, "Help."
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and like note it, like I feel that in my body when I say it. There's a real physical response. And I think it's really important to make note of the fact that asking for help isn't giving up. It's actually refusing to give up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you reach that point where you feel like you're not capacitated to handle the next thing in front of you, that's the time that you bring in your support system, whatever that is, whether that's Saluna or it's somebody at your school or it's a peer group or it's an adult that's trusted. And yeah, that's not giving up. That's refusing to give up.
Yeah. Oh, that's precious. Just letting someone else kind of be part of the doing, so you're not doing it. That is so precious. Jyothi, I really wish we had more time to dive into more, but I feel like you've left us in a really good place. So we're going to wrap up our time here. Before I let you go, though, I'm wondering if you could give us a little more, a few more tips on stress management, specifically around test taking, or even if you have like a list for a toolkit that you can leave that we can make available to our listeners, that would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. So I do have a list. I don't have it like immediately available for me. I don't know if there's a way that we can get it to folks, but I have a list of like 12 things that are really easily applicable that everybody can use. So we will get that to folks. The last one I would say is going back to an earlier point in this conversation, find something that feels delightful, joyful, playful for you. One of my kids' favorites is they make up words. And like just this morning, my kiddo was heading to school for his test, which if he doesn't pass, he cannot go to 4th grade in this state. But he was like, "Mommy, I'm feeling kind of skited." And I was like, "Oh, I totally get that." And skited is scared and excited. And it was because he's scared of the test, but he's also excited because today was the last day of reading, which is his least favorite thing. And so he's really excited that it's almost over, but he's also a little nervous because he wants to do well. And so do something playful, make up a word, shake, make raspberries, play your favorite Beyonce, Taylor Swift song. They both got great new albums that you can totally jam to. So,
I love that. Oh, well, okay. If I were to borrow that style, I would say right now I am tired and excited because it has been a long day, but I'm very excited that we get to give people some tools today. And it's funny you said Taylor Swift. So at some point when you were shaking, I was like, she actually kind of looks like haircut, and it's the red lip. And I'm not gonna say it, but then here I am saying it. But you did have a Taylor Swift thing going on right here. Okay, I will go on a tangent about that. But folks, Jyothi is going to have tools available for us. I got distracted by the Taylor Swift thing. Jyothi is going to have some. It's going to provide us with a list of things that will be part of a toolkit that we will make available to you. Continue to use the Saluna app to send in your topics, things that you want to hear us talk about. You asked and we answered with this one. We are so excited to get to walk alongside with you. Also, a reminder: this is available to Californians age 13 to 25. So open up the app. You will find more episodes of the live show. We will be streaming once a month, and you can always find old stuff that we've done before. You'll also find a lot of content, a lot of help with some professionals. Now, we are so excited, Jyothi, that you have joined us, and thank you so much. Thank you so much. Hugs to your kid. I really hope everything turns out great, and he actually gets to be excited about 4th grade pretty soon.
Well, here's the good news for us. We're moving to Florida. So if he doesn't pass, it doesn't matter.
It's a win-win. That's amazing. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Jyothi, thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.